Welcome to the Sunday morning Marxist Forum. I'm Richard Farnbaum, and I'll be the moderator today. As the countries of Africa, of the African continent, step up their struggle to free themselves from the shackles of imperialism and underdevelopment, Marxists around the world need to inform themselves about this vast and varied continent. Our speaker today has long been making a significant contribution to this effort. Anne Garrison is a contributing editor to the Black Agenda Report and a contributor to the Gray Zone. Recordings of Anne's past contributions to the Sunday Morning Marxist Forum can be found at our website, ICSS.marx.org. Without further ado, I want to welcome Anne Garrison to the Sunday Morning Marxist Forum. Go ahead, please, Anne.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Thank you for asking me to talk today. The first thing I want to say is that ICSS asked me to talk about Africa, and when someone asks me to do that, I always feel compelled to say that there are 54 nations in Africa, and I'm no expert on all of them. I thought someone was sure to ask me about Sudan, which I'm not unusually knowledgeable about. So I'll just say congratulations to the Sudanese army, the Sudanese National Army, for retaking control of Khartoum, the capital, from the rapid support forces, who seem to be the worst actors in this situation. But as I said, I only know the basics of that. One of the few things I do know is that the US designated crimes committed by the rapid support forces as genocide, of course, refusing to do the same regarding Israel's crimes in Gaza. The US most always has ulterior motives when it declares what it calls a genocide designation as regarding Libya and Xinjiang, but US motives in Sudan aren't really clear. In 2022, I was in Ethiopia while it was at war internally, and the US was siding with the Tigray Liberation Front, making Ethiopians fearful of a US NATO attack by floating the word genocide. They float the word genocide, and you can be sure they're considering intervening if they may not ultimately. Also, I had time to write about 4,000 words, mostly about the alliance of Sahel states. So after that, I'm just going to wing it going through my slides. So, okay, that said, I'm particularly knowledgeable about the African Great Lakes region, most of all the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, and about the Horn of Africa, most of all Eritrea, Djibouti, and Somalia. These are also the parts of Africa where war and conflict threaten balkanization. So those are my areas of particular expertise, but I'm going to start with West Africa Alliance of Sahel states, specifically Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, which I'm learning more about every day. All three of these states saw popular military coups between 2021 and 2023. Assimi Goïta became the president of Mali in 2021. Ibrahim Traoré became the president of Burkina Faso in 2022, and Abdurrahman, I'm going to get that one right, Abdurrahman Chiani became the president of Niger in 2023. These are all former French colonies, and they've all expelled French and US military. The US built the largest drone base in the world in Niger in the name of fighting terrorism, but terrorism was only getting worse despite US and French military operations. Surprise, surprise. All three nations withdrew from ECOWAS, the Western-dominated economic community of West African states, and the US then tried to talk ECOWAS into staging a military intervention, which ECOWAS thankfully refused to do. These three states then confederated, forming the Alliance of Sahel states, which in French is the Alliance des États du Sahel, so they're often called the AES. Could we get slide number 2, the map of the Alliance of Sahel States? Okay, we have that? Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so I think so, yes.
Okay. These 3 states confederated, forming the Alliance of Sahel States, as I said. They announced their intention to cooperate on regional security, economic integration, sovereignty, and economic independence. Regional economic integration means that countries within a geographic area agree to reduce or eliminate trade barriers for the sake of economic cooperation and interdependence, leading to increased trade, investment, and hopefully greater economic growth. They decided they're stronger together than alone within boundaries drawn at the Berlin Conference in 1885, where Europeans carved up Africa. In January, they announced a common passport, and in February, they raised a common flag. They're a landlocked alliance, but in March, Togo signaled its interest in leaving ECOWAS to join them, which would give them access to the sea. There's also talk of Senegal and other bordering and coastal states following suit. Okay, could we have the slide, the next slide of the Confederation flag?
Yes, go.
We have that? Okay, that's the slide of the Confederation of Sahel States, the Alliance des États, Alliance des États du Sahel. Okay, now can we have the next slide, the 3 presidents at the raising of the common flag?
Yes.
Okay, now this was a really inspiring moment. This is a confederation, meaning a union of sovereign nations, which retain autonomy, but establish some shared institutions and policies, including, in this case, a unified Sahel States military force to fight the terrorism that the US and France were failing to fight. I believe it is their goal to ultimately become a federation with a central government and a common currency. Again, they've decided they're stronger together than they are alone, but they have to work it out in steps. Now, this is one of the few bright spots on the planet, and those of us following it know that the Sahel states must be defended. There will be inevitable destabilization schemes. There are, I've already mentioned one, and losing the Sahel States Alliance would be an absolutely crushing blow to anti-imperialist, anti-colonial struggles all over the world. Now, maybe we can go back to my screen. I mean, back to myself talking. Have we got that? Okay. These 3 states are reclaiming sovereignty, challenging neocolonialism, and rearranging the economic setup that previously meant that despite living in resource-rich countries, the people there were extremely poor. They're turning that pyramid on its head so that foreigners no longer extract the vast majority of the country's wealth and reward only a tiny comprador class inside the country. They're changing policies to redistribute wealth internationally and within the countries. The resource wealth of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger includes oil, uranium, gold, lithium, and iron ore, all things that make society run and glimmer in the developed world. They also export agricultural products, but minerals are their greatest wealth. To now, they've been extracted without benefit to the people because the vast majority of the companies who possess the technology needed to extract minerals are from the developed world, from the US, Europe, Canada, China, and even Russia. Russia is so resource rich that it's not as existentially motivated as these other parts of the world are, to be pursuing resources in Africa. But that doesn't mean they're not motivated. They've gone after the bauxite in Guinea, and they angered the US by winning a contract to mine Burundi's by offering a better deal. Increased competition from various corporations and from the countries of the developed world for African resources puts African countries in a better bargaining position, assuming they have governments that are bargaining on behalf of the people. So Africa needs these companies who have been able to set favorable terms. Often they'll promise some pathetic profit share, like 5%, and then even cheat Africans out of that. Chad, for example, has nothing to show but pollution for ExxonMobil's Chad Cameroon pipeline. The Sahel states are, the Alliance of Sahel states are refusing those unfavorable terms, demanding not only higher taxes on wealth extracted, but also joint ventures where they're getting a percentage of the overall value of the company. Instead of just levying X amount in taxes, they may demand a 20% share or more, or even a controlling interest. It's different in each situation, but the bottom line is that they're negotiating with competing countries and corporations and demanding an equity share instead of just being dominated by France and French corporations. And they've also nationalized some key resources. This is most welcome, of course. For example, Niger nationalized the Marouane uranium mine. That's the largest uranium mine in the world. Recently, there's news that Niger kicked out a Chinese mining company, telling them to pack up and leave in one day because they'd been exploiting workers, not paying taxes, and cheating the people in all the usual ways. China has been more positive in Africa by building roads and other infrastructure, but China and its corporations can still be just as exploitative, and these countries are saying they're through taking it from either side of the world. In just the past year or so, Mali has reclaimed about $500 million in unpaid tax revenues, which gives you a sense of how bad the situation was. In addition to having low tax rates, foreign corporations were just not paying the taxes at all. Foreign companies operating in Mali claimed they weren't evading taxes, and in several cases, Mali actually threw some of their execs in prison until they paid up. These countries are also making another key change by moving to industrialize, trying to move up the value chain. In Mali, they've built one of the world's largest lithium mines, but not just to mine it. They're also starting to complete the initial stages of refining lithium after it comes out of the ground. In Burkina Faso, they're starting to build gold refineries so that gold doesn't just leave without added value and without employing Burkinabes. When a country industrializes, and Walter Rodney explained this very well in How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, when a country industrializes, it produces products its people can consume and products it can export, and it develops a more complex division of labor with the skills needed to run a modern society. They're also moving to industrialize agriculture, once again, instead of simply exporting raw materials. In Burkina Faso, the president inaugurated a plant that makes flour from wheat and other grains so they can import less flour and make more of their own bread and other basic foods inside Burkina Faso, not depending on imports. Burkina Faso's revolutionary hero, Thomas Sankara, famously said,
I think your sound went off.
I think we've lost Anne.
Yeah, I couldn't hear her. Now she's
how long,
stopping.
that just happened, the internet gremlins did that. I didn't I didn't even touch the screen. So when did you lose me?
Just a few seconds ago, just
Okay.
the last sentence.
Okay. So I said that Sankara, Thomas Sankara, Burkina Faso's revolutionary hero, was in power for all of 4 years, from 1983 to 1987, before he was assassinated in a French-backed coup, which should remind us of the imperative of defending the Sahel States Alliance. In August, Burkina Faso commemorated the 34th anniversary of Sankara's assassination and unveiled a statue of him at the university named after him in the capital, Ouagadougou. Now, can we have the next slide, which should be Burkina Faso's President, Ibrahim Traoré. Do we have that? Yes, okay. Captain, now President Ibrahim Traoré. He is widely perceived to be Sankara's successor, and there have already been attempts to assassinate him. He's hugely eloquent and charismatic, as charismatic as Sankara or Fidel or Che. He's the face of the Confederation, now recognized all over the world. There are reports that he's already survived 18 assassination attempts, although, of course, these aren't reported in the dominant press here or in Europe. This is hardly a surprise, and it caused me to look up the number of plots and attempts to kill Castro, said to be in the hundreds, and including 8 proven CIA attempts that came out in the Church Committee in 1975. And of course, the CIA and European state operatives assassinated Patrice Lumumba, the Democratic of the Congo's first prime minister, in 1961. Now, that's the kind of liberatory potential the Sahel states represent, and it's the kind of imperial force they're up against. Sankara despised all the African big men of the comprador class who accumulated vast wealth, lived in luxury, and rode around in luxury cars, as they still do. Sankara could be seen pedaling around on his bicycle by himself and didn't seem to have taken adequate security measures. Traoré and the other AES presidents know very well that they're in danger, and they have security details, but they're still far from the famous African big men. One of the first things that Traoré did after coming to power was announce that he would continue to live on his military captain's salary of about $1,000 a month. You can contrast that, for example, to the $20,000 a month that parliamentarians pay themselves in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, in addition to all kinds of perks and per diems, while 75% of the Congolese live on a few dollars a day. Now, could we have the next slide of Ibrahim Traoré? Yeah.
Yes,
okay.
go ahead.
Okay, there he is. There he is speaking when they raised the flag of the Alliance of Sahel States. He's speaking about why he's the target of assassination attempts. And I wish I'd had time to clip video of him saying this, but I didn't, so I'll have to quote him. Okay, he said, "Our only crime may have been to revolutionize our health system, to equip hospitals, to build modern medical facilities. Our only crime may have been to transform our education system, to construct schools that meet modern standards, and to reform our curriculum." That means they got rid of the colonial curriculum. "Our only crime may have been to support our farmers with affordable fertilizers, to provide them with the means to cultivate their fields freely so that we can achieve food self-sufficiency. Our only crime may have been to build road and railway infrastructure so that our people can move freely. In short, all we are trying to do, some have tried before us, but unfortunately, the slaves of the Salon, the Africans who blindly serve imperialist interests, have sought to obstruct us. There is no reason to be discouraged because history has always proven us right, and it will continue to do so. Today, our land is flourishing. When we first announced our agricultural initiatives, they mocked us. They said it was impossible. But today, our cocoa thrives, our sunflowers flourish, and our wheat production is strong. Okay, so I hope that demonstrates how eloquent he is and why he's a target. He and Burkina Faso are targets of assassination and destabilization, as are all the Sahel states. He says that, I mean, I keep forgetting this. I don't mean the Sahel states. I mean the alliance of Sahel states. He says that French military bases in Benin and Ivory Coast are being used to stage covert operations against Burkina Faso. And I'm sure there are plenty of meetings going on in European and North American capitals to plan covert operations against all three members of the Sahel States Alliance. There are a lot of videos about this with English subtitles on the web. They're easy to find and they're really exciting. I also want to recommend a documentary about Sankara's life and legacy, Thomas Sankara, the Upright Men, and it's a combination of several indigenous languages. The French named Burkina Faso Upper Volta, but it's changed its name in 1984 during the first year Sankara was in power. Traoré also took a number of symbolic steps to express French colonialism, like abandoning silly French court costumes. Now, getting back to the battle against agricultural imperialism, Burkina Faso grows a lot of tomatoes, but they weren't producing ketchup or tomato sauce. Now they're producing and exporting both, consuming and exporting both. So all across agricultural industries, these countries are trying to add value instead of just exporting raw materials for foreign corporations to turn into commodities and then sell back to them at high cost. Now, one of the largest and most daunting challenges is escaping from the CFA franc, which traps these countries in French financial structures. I can't claim to understand this like an economist, but I can say that it's now very much a part of the conversation in these three states and in the alliance, as it wasn't before. There have been official conferences held by different governments at different times where they brought together experts to talk about it. But launching a new currency is challenging and complex in all sorts of ways. It's not like the flip of a light switch. In 2011, Muammar Gaddafi and Laurent Gbagbo, the first center-left president of the Ivory Coast, were discussing the possibility of creating an African currency. That was, of course, the year that Gaddafi was assassinated and Gbagbo was kidnapped and hijacked to the ICC. The ICC had indicted Gaddafi, but he didn't live to face trial. And Gbagbo was removed from power and wasn't acquitted and released for another 10 years. This is an example of how international criminal law has thus far been war by other means. At this stage, the Sahel States Alliance isn't ready to move aggressively on a currency reform, but it's talking about the mechanics and laying the groundwork to make it sustainable over time. It should become more of a possibility as these countries develop, but if they move too fast, it could be destabilizing. Now, just a few words about the Sahel states' situation in the new Cold War, where they are on the front lines through no fault of their own. They rejected US and French exploitation and military domination, but they never said that they wanted to sever all relations with Western countries. They just said they wanted to be sovereign and dictate more of their own terms of engagement. And that was something that France was unwilling to do. The Sahel States Alliance have pursued different security partnerships by working, first of all, with Egypt, but also with Russia in the struggle ISIS and Al-Qaeda linked groups. They've also deepened their relationships with countries in Asia and other parts of Africa. France had been there for decades, and as I said, the US had built the world's largest drone base in Niger, but the Sahel was still racked by violence and terrorism. This was one thing that made the military coups in these states popular. They had to switch teams because France and the US weren't winning the fight against terrorism. And of course, there's plenty of evidence that they were never trying or they were even doing the opposite. I think we all know that terrorism greatly increased in these states after the 2011 NATO destruction of Libya spread weapons all over North and Central Africa. So the US and France were claiming to fight the problem they created. When these countries looked for a new security partner, Russia was really the only option. And of course, the West has demonized them ever since for making that choice. One of their main security strategies, particularly in Burkina Faso, is mobilization against terrorist groups, as opposed to relying on outside forces. Security and development are, of course, tied, and people who have very few prospects in life are susceptible to recruitment by jihadis, many of whom act just like foreign imperialists by taking over mines. And when people are trying to reclaim their own land for their own development, that makes the fight against terrorism more meaningful. Okay, now the last point about the Alliance of Sahel States, and getting back to my theme of confederation versus balkanization. These states have declared that they're breaking down unnatural borders created when European states carved up Africa at the 1885 Berlin Conference. And again, as I said, they're ultimately looking to federate with a central government. They're not going back to some fantasy. Could we go back to the second slide? We got the second slide here. Yeah, okay. So they're not looking to return some fantasy that there was a state within these boundaries prior to colonization. They've decided that they have common goals, purpose, history, and that they're stronger together. Now, at the same time that the Alliance of Sahel States are confederating, other African nations and peoples within nations are at odds or even at war, with some reclaiming the right to return to what they insist are pre-colonial borders. Now, one problem with reclaiming pre-colonial borders is that borders weren't clearly defined and delineated on maps prior to the Berlin Conference. So you can have all kinds of claims about who belongs together, often based on language, culture, assertions about where prior kingdoms began and ended. Rwanda is carrying out a devastating war in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, claiming that it was split from the Kivu provinces and other Kinyarwanda speakers in 1885. In 1962, the Organization of African Unity, which preceded the African Union, resolved to respect colonial to avoid all sorts of wars and irredentist territorial claims. You also have countries like Eritrea and the secessionist state of Somaliland within Somalia, insisting that they developed an identity within colonial boundaries that should be sovereign. Now, in 2018, let's see, could I have, let's see, could I have, let's see, this, slide number 10. Could you show slide number 10? Okay, yeah. And wait a minute, I just lost something. Okay, here we go. In 2018, Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Somalia created a promising alliance. This is then Somali President Abdullahi Mohamed Farmajo and President Isaias Afwerki of Eritrea and Ethiopian President Abiy Ahmed. Now, now Ethiopia seems to be on the verge of going to war with either Eritrea or Somalia to establish what it claims was pre-colonial access to the sea. And Ethiopia is also threatening the sovereignty of, excuse me, there's also, let's see, can we get slide number 8? Okay, that's Ethiopia, and those are different language groups and peoples within Ethiopia who are often fighting with the central government, saying that they're being persecuted, that there's ethnic discrimination, and in some cases that they want to split. There's always a danger that seems to be maybe acute now, that Ethiopia will split into different ethnic groupings. But I think that's very unlikely ultimately. So could we get slide number 9? Okay, this is a map. It says it's altered because there was a fact check on it. It's claiming that Ethiopia over here owns this chunk of the Red Sea based on some pre-colonial claim. And it's very aggressive, and President Abiy Ahmed upset the whole Horn of Africa and this promising alliance that I discussed before by claiming this right to the sea and claiming that he would get it one way or another, which, you know, was obviously a militarily aggressive statement. Ethiopia does not have the military strength and organization to pursue this kind of aggression for Red Sea coast right now, because it's fighting so many internal wars based on ethnic animosity. So let's see, there's another slide I want to see. Okay, slide number 7. Okay, there you see the countries of Eritrea, Ethiopia, Djibouti, Somaliland, and Somalia. And Somaliland is in yellow to delineate this secessionist state. Somaliland has for a long time been fighting to secede from Somalia, and it has its own administration, although it has regions within Somaliland. Somaliland is formally a state within Somalia, is claiming independence, but there are regions within Somaliland who are fighting and claiming that they want to be part of Somalia. Now, here you have an especially sad situation because the U.S. wants ports here on Somalia's, it's called Red Sea coast in general, but we're talking about the Gulf of Berbera here. They want 2 ports, and they're going to get them. Both of these states are so weak, Somalia and Somaliland, that they're not going to stop the U.S. if they want ports one way or another. But Somaliland and Somalia, with their competing territorial claims, are competing to give these ports away to the U.S. under their authority. I mean, Somalia says, okay, we'll give you those ports. Somaliland says, no, they're within our territory, we'll give you those ports. And of course, these are hugely geostrategic in that they're right on the Red Sea, right at the mouth of the Red Sea, and they're right across from Yemen. Okay. Now, I'll move on to the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Could you show us slide number 11? Oh, wait, excuse me. There's something I want to go back. There's something else I meant to say before going on to the Democratic Republic of the Congo. I'm winging it here now. But that is that the Sahel States Alliance are a really bright spot on the planet. And another is Eritrea, one of the countries, the one sprawling the Red Sea on the other side, on the northern side of the mouth of the Red Sea. And this is a country that defies the dictates of Western powers, pursues egalitarian social development, eschews IMF and World Bank debt, demands a fair price for its natural resources, and refuses to collaborate with AFRICOM, the US Africa Command. So, of course, it's constantly demonized by the West and subjected to myriad destabilization schemes, including an attempt to drain it of its young, educated population. Like Cubans and Venezuelans, Eritreans have been given great favor in immigrant processing. You don't have to do much more than say you're Eritrean to get into Europe or the US. But that may be changing now. I'm not gonna, that may be changing now with Trump's rapidly anti-immigrant policies, but that's been true up to now. And Ethiopians have been exposed bragging on TikTok about how easy it's been for them to get into Europe if they just lie and manage to make a case that they're Eritrean. From 2009 to 2018, the US prevailed in persuading the UN to impose sanctions on Eritrea based on the totally bogus claim that they were somehow collaborating with the terrorist group Al-Shabaab. And one consequence of sanctions is that foreigners are afraid to trade with you or do business in your country for fear of being punished, most of all by the US. Now, after those sanctions were lifted in 2018, Eritrea was sanction-free for all of 3 years until 2021, when the US imposed the most punishing sanctions by excluding it from the SWIFT system for conducting international financial transactions. That happened when Eritrea was fighting with Ethiopia against the US-backed Tigray People's Liberation Front. I visited Eritrea in 2022 as a guest of the government, visiting its health centers and agricultural centers, and speaking to the ministers of health, education, and agriculture, and speaking to its chief development strategist, Agos Gebreyewa. He is personally sanctioned, but he was really impressive. Asmara, the capital of Eritrea, is a beautiful human-scale city which has preserved the classic Italian modernist architecture that caused UNESCO to declare it a World Heritage Site. And this is a rare instance in which something positive came of colonization. I never saw anyone in Asmara or anywhere else in Eritrea begging or sleeping on the street, which is one of my first measures of a healthy society. I visited health centers, and everything I was told was confirmed by UN statistics, and this week by the Canadian development and human rights professional Nala Balji, the UN's resident and humanitarian coordinator in Eritrea, in her report after a year in the country. She said that they found innovative ways to use limited resources to protect those most vulnerable, with one example being their Barefoot Doctors Initiative, where skilled individuals are sent out into communities that are all but inaccessible. When I was there, they showed me maps of how they had assured that no one would have to walk a punishing distance for basic health services, which were provided by nurses and paramedics in rural communities. And one thing I'd like to note about Eritrea's health strategy is that they refused to succumb to pressure to mass vaccinate for COVID-19 because there hadn't been any signs of a pandemic there. Now, of course, they were hugely excoriated for this, but they had a committee of cabinet ministers meeting regularly to monitor presence of the virus, and they didn't give in. At the same time, they've achieved near universal vaccination for easily preventable childhood diseases and all but completely eliminated female genital mutilation. Nalavaji said there are over 900 dams in this country. As a drought-prone area of the world, they have prioritized conserving water and soil. And when I talked to Agos Gebreyewa, he told me their resolve is that not one drop of rain will fail to irrigate, and not one drop will erode the soil. Now, I just wanted to talk about Eritrea a bit because I think we can all use some heartening news. And again, going back to my theme about Confederation versus Balkanization, Ethiopia is now unfortunately threatening Eritrea, claiming that it has a pre-colonial right to some of its Red Sea coast. Now, if we can go back to the slideshow, I'm just going to riff a bit on why balkanization is a threat in the DRC. Let's see. We go back here to slide number 10. Oh, no, excuse me, slide number 11. That's 10. Those are the leaders of the three Horn of Africa
That's
states.
11, right? No?
11. Yeah, let's do 11. Okay. This is the Democratic Republic of the Congo, appropriately read because it's always bleeding. It's probably the most resource-rich nation on the planet. The only competitors would be Russia and Brazil, both of which are very resource-rich. But it's probably the most resource-rich nation on the planet. And sometimes you think, oh, there's something they don't have, like lithium. We never heard about lithium in the Democratic Republic of the Congo until a few years ago, and suddenly we hear that there are vast reserves. Now, can we close in on slide number 12? 12? Okay. This is the Democratic Republic of the Congo, bordering on its east Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, and Tanzania. Tanzania is not so relevant in what I'm going to say. Rwanda and Uganda have been at war in the Democratic Republic of the Congo for 30 years. Off and on. First, there were two wars, one beginning in 1996, another in 1997. It's either 7 or 8, but 7 or 8. The Second Congo War, which drew in all the countries bordering DR Congo, all 9, and was horrible conflict. Rwanda and Uganda have continued to go to war and occupy parts of DR Congo again and again during those 30 years. Rwanda is most obviously and verbally aggressive, and you've probably heard of the M23 militia, a Rwandan militia that also has connections to Uganda, but a Rwandan militia fighting in Eastern Congo. And the president of Rwanda, let's see here, maybe let's see slide number 14. That's the president of Rwanda, Paul Kagame. He claims a pre-colonial right to the Kivu provinces bordering Rwanda, which are hugely mineral rich. Most of the mineral wealth of the Democratic Republic of the Congo is in the east. The parts that are war-torn are in the northeast, bordering Uganda and Rwanda, in the south. And I'm not going to talk too much about this because it doesn't have to do with balkanization, but in the south, you have the huge cobalt mines, which are predominantly right now controlled by Chinese concerns, who are not treating the miners well at all. But getting back to the balkanization theme, it's in the northeast, where Rwanda, Uganda, and Burundi border the Democratic Republic of the Congo. There have been constant wars, and for 30 years. And the president of Rwanda claims that he has a that he and Rwanda have a pre-colonial right to the neighboring Kivu provinces, North and South Kivu province. No matter, he is one of the worst war criminals, genocide criminals, and totalitarians in the world. But he is the toast of Davos. Every year he's at Davos, and he is willing to use Rwanda as an experiment for all of their projects, say from sustainable cities to digital IDs extreme surveillance, and extremely aggressive vaccination. Like during the COVID pandemic, Rwandans were in some cases held down and vaccinated, or they were fleeing over borders. Now, whatever you think of the COVID-19 vaccine, this is really aggressive. So anyway, he's been, Rwanda and Uganda have been at war and making territorial claims in the Democratic Republic of the Congo for a long time. Right now, the M23 militia that you probably heard about is holding and seizing more and more territory. And the West is just making these symbolic gestures. It imposes some sanctions, or the UN Security Council passes a resolution calling on Rwanda to withdraw its troops. They're not just M23 troops in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. There are Rwandan troops. The UN report come out every 6 months in 2024 said that there are more Rwandan troops even than M23. Rwanda keeps denying this. It's sort of amazing. They keep denying that these troops are there, even though everyone knows, and it's in these UN reports, but they deny it. And then the press feels like they need to keep repeating the denials, giving them some shred of legitimacy. They are smuggling vast amounts of minerals out through Rwanda and Uganda, particularly Rwanda. And this has been documented. This has been documented during these past 30 years. At one point, the reports on illegal resource extraction that the UN produced at the beginning of in 2001, 2002, and 2003 said that Rwanda had actually set up a Congo desk to handle the illicit minerals traffic and sell minerals on international markets. Still, they claim they're not doing this. They claim that it's all about protecting the Tutsi minority in Eastern Congo. The president of Rwanda is a Tutsi, and probably everyone knows the narrative told in Hotel Rwanda and constructed by the International Criminal Tribunal on Rwanda, which is that the Rwandan genocide was a simple Manichaean story, good and evil, in which evil Hutus sacrificed angelic Tutsis, basically. It was a much more complex event. It was a 4-year war, ending in the massacres, the infamous massacres of the final 100 days. And there were inter-ethnic massacres, politically motivated massacres, and eventually Rwandan president, then General Paul Kagame, came out on top, seized power in Kigali, and he was our guy. And the US has backed these wars in the Democratic Republic of the Congo ever since. Again, like they're among those making symbolic gestures. They sanctioned one of the top ministers in Rwanda. But sanctioning individuals is not going to do anything. Another thing the US did like this was in the West Bank at one point when the violence in Palestine was getting really bad and getting a lot of press. They sanctioned several individuals in the West Bank. Well, what's that going to do? Nothing. The UN Security Council keeps passing resolutions and then calling on Rwanda to do what it asked them to do. It asked these troops to get out of Congo, and they don't. And the UN Security Council, which has the power to do this, does not impose sanctions. What really needs to happen is that the weapons flows into Rwanda and the minerals flows out need to be sanctioned. That needs to happen, or the whole exploitative apparatus remains in place. Now, at the same time, there's the resource extraction motive. Kagame, as I said, wants to claim the Kivu provinces, saying that they were once part of Rwanda. And 7 million people have been displaced. This number keeps climbing. 7 million people are living in IDP camps at this point. And I want to show some of the pictures down here. Wait a minute, I'm looking at the slides trying to find. I thought I had some more slides here. Just a sec. My slideshow, my version of the slideshow is not cooperating, but now down near the, oh yeah, okay, here we go. The slides are images. The last slides there, Mehmet, okay, here we go. We have images of people in IDP camps, and I don't know if we're getting to them. Let me see what I see in Zoom. I'm seeing my own version. I'm seeing my own version of the slides. Okay, well, I had at the end images of the IDP camps, of what kind of suffering is going on here. For some reason, I'm not. Oh, why does this always happen when company calls?
If you have the slide number, we'll show that.
Okay, my slideshow is not cooperating here. Well, at the end, near the end, I think you should probably see
Why
some.
don't you scroll down?
There we go. There we go. That's it. Okay, now I'm able to see the slide numbers. Okay, sorry about that. Let's go up to say 22 or 20. Okay, these are just images, people fleeing. Congolese are always on the move, fleeing M23 and the Rwandan army, most of all. This is a picture from an IDP camp. Here, 20, if you see 22, these are people on the move. 23, this is an internally displaced persons camp and just gives you an idea of the scale of this. There are camps like this all over the Eastern DRC. And these are now 20, 24, 25, 26. Maybe slowly. And these are images of children who always suffer most. And some of the most heartbreaking, let's see, 20, 26, some of the most heartbreaking images are of them trying to take care of one another, or, you know, the older ones marching on the road again, on the move, the smaller ones on their backs. Now, let's see, can we go back? Okay, okay. Okay, let's see, 13. Slide number 13. Okay, and that's the president of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. He's hugely corrupt, hugely inept, has not built an army to protect the people of the Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo. And it's often hard to tell just what his motivations are. The previous president, Joseph Kabila, was no doubt collaborating with it's hard to say where he is, but he's not taking care of the people, and he's not liked. Now, let's see, slide number 15. There's a Congolese singer, rapper, who was just assassinated. And he was, I'm trying to remember his name. His last name is Odenga. And Deklat Odenga. And he was assassinated in February. And he first became famous and beloved for criticizing the Congolese government. At the time that he was assassinated, he was criticizing both the Congolese government and Rwanda and the M23 militias. It seems like he was most likely assassinated by M23 when he was recording a video criticizing them. Criticizing them is putting it mildly. Okay, you have the next slide. I think it's 16. That's Declat Intengo again. And 17, you see 17? 17 is his funeral. You can see people are devastated. And at his funeral, Congolese soldiers or Congolese police actually fired into the crowd, killing 2 people. Now, 18, we have another musician. We have 18. Okay. This musician, he's a Congolese French musician, singer, rapper, as they all seem to be these days. And he is highly critical of, again, both the Congolese government and the invading Rwandan army, Rwanda and Uganda. And here, the next slide is of him performing in Kinshasa. See, yeah, okay, there he is performing in Kinshasa, draped in a Congolese flag. And next slide. Okay, he was going to do this concert to raise money for UNICEF to help Congolese children displaced by the war. This was to be on April 7th, and Rwanda, the government, and the Rwandan community that supports the government, and the diaspora communities in this case are deeply divided, whether they support the government or they don't. But the government and the group of Congolese French who support the government objected to this. They objected because it was scheduled for April 7th. And April 7th is the day that they commemorate the Rwandan genocide. So they were saying that it would be disrespectful to hold this concert in solidarity with the Congolese to raise money for Congolese children on the day that they commemorate the genocide. This hasn't been reported much in France. I have a friend in Paris who said it's not being reported in the French media, which indicates the ongoing indifference to Africa. But it's a huge issue for Rwandan and Congolese people. Rwanda even threatened violence. I mean, they said that they predicted street violence if this took place, if this took place, meaning that they would send a protest and they would instigate violence. So this is ongoing, and there's a constant struggle over the narratives in the Congo, and with their insistence that April 7th belongs to them, and that the only thing that can be commemorated or noted on April 7th is the genocide against the Tutsi. They're reinforcing and deploying the genocide against the Tutsi narrative, which was, as I said, created and reinforced by the International Criminal Tribunal in Rwanda, which never tried any Hutus, which solely tried Tutsis, and refused even to consider the assassination of the Rwandan and Burundian presidents, which President Kagame, then General, now President Kagame, was guilty of, because that would have upset this genocide against the Tutsi narrative. The court never even considered it. At one point, someone told me, someone who's a lawyer at the court said that a judge told her, "We don't investigate plane crashes," meaning they didn't investigate the event that triggered the massacres. There was huge tension, refugees all over, or internally displaced people surrounding the city of Kigali when this happened, and the violence erupted after the president was assassinated. Okay, so the Tutsi genocide narrative that was created by that was reinforced by the International Criminal Tribunal on Rwanda has been Rwanda's excuse for being in the Democratic Republic of the Congo for 30 years. Every time they're challenged, why are your troops in Rwanda? Why are you shoveling all these minerals out? Why are you violating Congo's sovereignty? We have to protect the Tutsis. We have to protect the Tutsis in Eastern Congo. And it's like a mantra. They repeat it over and over in a press conference last week. Reporters kept asking.
It's almost an hour, Anne.
Okay. So, good. Let's wrap up here. This is about one of the main things this is about is Rwanda claiming this territory that they claim was theirs prior to the 1885 Berlin Conference. Okay, so why don't we just go ahead from there?
You wrapped up? Oh, sorry. Are you wrapping up, Anne?
Yeah. I said, let's just go ahead. I said, okay,
Yeah.
This is another instance in which one of the things, it's not everything that's going on, but one of the main things that's going on is that Rwanda is claiming pre-colonial borders. This is a fantasy, as I said. States weren't delineated, and even if the boundaries established at the Berlin Conference were to be broken down, as the Sahel states are trying to break them down, it has to be done voluntarily, not by war and conflict. So,
Thank you.
do we have any questions now?
Yes. Before we go on to questions, a few announcements. In April, we have a very full and interesting program. On the 6th, we have Seth Morrison from Jewish Voice for Peace, who will speak on weaponization of anti-Semitism. On the 13th, we'll have Rodolfo and Eleonora Lucina speaking from Rio de Janeiro, who will be talking about Brazil on the edge, on a razor's edge. On the 20th, we'll have Rick Sterling will report back on China, including on the whole Uyghur Holocaust hoax, and a tentative program on the 27th that's still not nailed down on Vietnam. So we have a very rich program. I want to thank, actually, before we go on, Anne, for a tremendous presentation. And I want to direct people to the ICSS website, Institute for the Critical Study of Society, which is icssmarks.org. And there's a lot of resources on there about future and past programs. And there's a very important section on donations. I want to report that we're making important strides to improve our programs and the coverage and the outreach for this program. And this costs money, and we need money. And the best way to do it is to, for people, most of our donations come from small monthly donations, as little as a couple of dollars, $5. And I strongly urge people to do it. The cheapest way to do it is through a check from your bank, which is completely free to you. If you know how to set up bill pay on your bank, it's very good. And if you don't, get in touch with us and we'll show you how to do it. And then there are other ways like Buy Me a Coffee or Patreon, which they take it cut, but are much more convenient to set up. So I strongly urge, I strongly request that people, especially people who've been watching and participating in our programs for a long time, consider donating an amount of money. Okay, we're ready to go on to questions and answers. There are already some people have their hands up, but if you want to participate, go to the React button at the bottom of your screen and open it up and hit the raise your hands. So currently I have Richard Wright, Eugene Rule, Lucy Rios, and Francis, and some other people we'll get to. But go ahead. The first one is Richard W.
Yeah, I wanted to thank both the presentations committee for this topic.
Richard, I can't hear you.
Oh,
Could
really?
you not?
I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
I can hear.
Richard is
Can
okay.
you hear me now?
Richard, you are okay. Go ahead,
Okay,
proceed.
sorry.
Oh, okay. It's just
You're okay.
It's just the other Richard, huh?
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I wanted to thank the presentations committee first for having on this topic. It's something I've been in need of for a long time now, and Anne for elaborating on the African situation or the continental situation. The question that came to mind in the initial presentation of the Alliance of the Sahel, was it Alliance of the Sahel?
Alliance of the Sahel States.
Thank you. My memory is never was actually what it was, but and that is I was reminded of when I was down in Nicaragua that a similar situation existed down there, and that you had a political economic situation, and that you had the three tendencies, they called them down in Nicaragua. One was from the urban, the other one was from the religious, the third was from the highlands, if I remember correctly. I can be corrected on that. So my question is what are the political economic dynamics of that coalition? I gather that you have some that are a little bit more charismatic than others. But more importantly, are there underlying political economic dynamics that are going on there that you could elaborate on? And I'll leave it there. I have other questions, of course, but I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Well, as I said, the most fundamental thing going on is that they're reclaiming sovereignty over their own resources and demanding a better deal with the foreign corporations and countries that purchase their resources, that have previously hugely exploited them, often promising a tiny percentage and not even, and then stealing even that. I'm trying to think what you mean by political economic dynamics that I didn't. The other most important thing I'd say there is, again, the industrialization. African countries and other countries in the global south all need to industrialize so as to produce products that they can consume, that they can export, and that will develop more complex divisions of labor and the skills needed to run a modern society.
If I could interject for a second.
Sure, go ahead.
To clarify the question,
Sure.
or, to draw parallels, if you will.
Okay, good.
In Nicaragua, what was going on was you had the working class basically in the cities, along with the liberation theology, and they were one tendency. You had the liberation theology, the base camps, the so-called base camps, as another tendency that was going on. And then in the northern area, I believe you had the more agricultural tendencies, and the farming, and of course they were after the same kinds of things you're talking about. And so that's what I was kind of wondering is if there's a similar dynamics going on in this coalition, and how they're, because we're seeing how this is being played out in Nicaragua now. I mean,
I think we
okay, yeah, thank you.
got the point of your question, Richard.
Okay, you want to know about the relationship
Okay,
between,
do you want to respond, or should we move on to another question?
I don't think I really have anything to say. I can't think of anything I have to say to that.
Okay, next one is Jean, followed by Lucy.
Okay.
Okay, and thank you. It's great to see you again. And thanks for coming back and giving us this great presentation and trying to educate us on all these issues. And I'll confess, I graduated from high school back in 1954.
Mhm.
And back in those days, we were taught that Africa was the dark continent. And there were, we divided it up into certain European countries that tried to enlighten them, like the Belgian Congo, French West Africa, because we knew that Africans were incapable of governing themselves, whether they were in Africa or here in the United States. And so, we've come a long way since those days. And I really think it's the efforts of people like yourself and many others that have contributed to this. But I guess my question is, I had a neighbor, African-American guy, lived across the street. We talked about Africa and China. And his point was that China has never enslaved a single African. And I want to take this and say, well, now we have China with the Belt and Road Initiative going through Central Asia to North Africa, the road through the Indian Ocean. These are ancient roads, connections between China and Africa. And I just want to get your thoughts on, China is now a global world power with a whole different vision of the way international relations should be structured. So I just want to know your thoughts on this matter. I'd be very interested in this.
So basically about China and Africa.
Yes.
Okay. No, China has never enslaved a single African that I know of. And also, China does not have a military command in Africa. The United States has AFRICOM, the U.S. military command, all over the continent. And as I said, the only country I know, well, the Sahel states have stopped cooperating with it. Before then, the only nation I knew of that was not cooperating was Eritrea, which I discussed. As I said, when I was talking about the Sahel states, the Chinese corporations and China are not angelic in Africa, but they are much more constructive. They're building roads and infrastructure, hospitals, and universities, not always as much as they promised. For example, in the Southeastern Democratic Republic of the Congo, they made promises that they haven't quite fulfilled, or have significantly failed to fulfill, but they're doing that instead of imposing a military command. In the Southeastern Democratic Republic of the Congo, which I mentioned, it's the site of huge cobalt mines and hugely geostrategic. People talk a lot about the minerals that are used in our electronic gadgets, especially focusing on the cell phones, but it should be understood that these minerals are also essential to weapons manufacture. And that's been an issue since way back. In the 1980s, early 1980s, there was a congressional budget document produced saying that controlling the cobalt reserves in the Democratic Republic of the Congo was absolutely essential. So we needed to control Southeastern Congo and it was northeastern Zambia. Zambia borders the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and the Katanga Copper Belt runs through both. But anyway, China is very present there. In some odd turn of events, Hunter Biden actually brokered sale of Freeport McMoran cobalt mines to a Chinese concern. Okay, and now Congress is acting all upset about Chinese influence and control of these resources. There's a book, I can't remember the name of it right now, but there's a book that's specifically focused on this region in southeastern Congo where China is dominating the cobalt mining, at least for now, and the US is making it an issue of it. And people are treated horrendously in these mines. Most are artisanal miners, that they're out breaking rocks on their own and selling to middlemen or directly to mining corporations, and they're paid almost nothing and work in horrible conditions. And of course, they need a government that represents them and does something about this. But I feel that China should also be doing something about it. China knows about the conditions in these mines, and I think they should do something about it, and they're not.
I would just
Okay.
note China does not claim to be perfect, and it does have government, state enterprises as well as
Right.
private enterprises that
Yeah,
operate.
yeah. And
Yeah.
both exist. Both of those kinds of enterprises exist in southeastern Congo.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I want to remind everybody that we have a lot of questioners lined up, and to keep your questions brief or comments brief so that we can get as many people in as possible. Next is Lucy, followed by Francis.
Thank you. Anna, thank you so much for your presentation. I really learned a lot, and I'm very happy that I attended this session. But I wanted to ask you about the conflict that you mentioned between the border, about the borders and the problem, because it appears to be very common everywhere. It's in the East Asian area also. There's a lot of conflict with borders. What mechanism is there for these countries to settle these problems? If the US and the imperialist powers in the West are meddling and using this to their advantage, they make the conflict even worse. So what are your views on that? I mean, what's out there for them in Africa?
Are you asking whether they can pursue some sort of legal?
Yeah, legal, yeah, or like the United Nations, but I don't know if even they can get involved in something.
Well, I think I said that the Organization of African States, which preceded the African Union,
Oh, okay.
decided, I think it was 1962 or 63, that they were going to respect colonial borders because otherwise they would have all sorts of wars over what pre-colonial borders were and what people belonged together. I recently edited a book by a Somali Kenyan scholar, and a lot of it is about the shift to war, which was waged in the 60s after Kenyan independence, because Britain had ignored a referendum held amongst Somali Kenyans on the Kenya-Somali border, and they had voted that they wanted to be part of Somalia upon independence. You have conflicts like this all over the continent. There are claims that Nigeria should be split into 4 pieces. I said there are claims within Ethiopia. Some want to split up the country along ethnic lines. But as I said, overcoming, well, first of all, there's often a fantasy about what pre-colonial borders were. because they were not demarcated and delineated. And of course, you can have
Right.
all sorts of arguments about it. Our people speak the same language as the people on the other side of the border, therefore we belong together. This is a common claim. Or, you know, the people who speak one language group within this country should be able to break away. But like the Sahel states, stronger states are in a better position in all sorts of ways. So, and the Sahel states are not going back to some fantasy of pre-colonial boundaries. Instead, they're coming together, say we have a shared history as French colonies, and we're stronger together. As to legal remedies based on pre-colonial claims, I don't know of anything like that. So I'd say it's up to African people to make
What
decisions.
happened to the
Go ahead.
well, what happened to the African Union, or wasn't there something like that at one time?
The African Union never decided that colonial
Okay.
boundaries should be abandoned. And I don't think they've ever turned around on the Organization of African Unity, the Organization of African States decision that colonial boundaries be respected. But like I said, countries can come together, and the countries in the Horn of Africa, although they hadn't gotten to the point of federating, or what confederating. Federating is the next step. You know, when you federate, you create a central government. They didn't get close to that, but they had signed a regional cooperation agreement that would have included regional economic integration, as I said, the elimination of tariffs, so you can have a more integrated economy in which people are able to make the best of their various strengths. That was really a promising agreement. The Horn of Africa was full of hope at that time. U.S. undermined Farmajo, the hugely popular president of Somalia. Then the United States backed the TPLF, the Tigray People's Liberation Front, which started a civil war in Ethiopia. And then the ethnic tensions within Ethiopia got worse, and Ethiopia started threatening both Somalia and Eritrea in its quest for Red Sea coast. So, like, what happened? Everybody was so hopeful. It looked like the region was going to come together. Not that they were going to abolish national boundaries, but that they were going to work together, like the Sahel states. Who knows what could have come of that? And the United States can only be glad it's used ethnicity, and there's plenty of stated policy that you can uncover about using ethnicity to divide Africans and prevent anything, as strong as the Sahel States Alliance. And Kwame Nkrumah said that the West would use ethnicity to divide Africa.
Okay, thank you. The next questioner is Francis, followed by the citizens of the planet.
With respect to Eritrea, Eritrea is portrayed in this country and in the West as a very authoritarian, dictatorial country with people have no freedom, pretty much as Cuba is characterized. In view of what you've said, I know nothing about Eritrea, but in view of what you've said, should we be looking at Eritrea as almost a Cuba of that part of Africa? And also, what's the potential for BRIC membership of a country like Eritrea, bearing in mind that Ethiopia is a BRIC member and may object to its membership as Brazil did to Venezuela?
Eritrea is sometimes called the Cuba of Africa. A lot of similarities. They pursued a more egalitarian society. They consider their national resources to be owned by the Eritrean people and to be used for their benefit. They don't have foreign companies coming in and owning mines or other resources in Eritrea. They have not had elections. President Isaias Afwerki has been president since the independence struggle, and the independence in, I think it was 1919. Well, anyway, I think it was 1993. And they have like grassroots organizations, like women's organizations, youth organizations, labor organizations that are do practice a kind of grassroots democracy. If Isaias Afwerki, my feeling is that Isaias Afwerki is hugely popular. If he were not, I think he would have been overthrown. It's like the Sahel states are also, at this point, military governments that were established in popular military coups. And Western democratic forms, procedures can be used to undermine a country. It's very easy for the West to come in and undermine an election. And it's totally bogus that we really respect democracy in Africa anyway. I talked a lot about Paul Kagame, the president of Rwanda. Well, he keeps winning elections by a thoroughly implausible 98%, 99%. He's done this one election after another. And he had the constitution changed so that he could rule indefinitely. The West doesn't bat an eye at these 98% victories and the like. It's reported in the press, but you know, Eritrea is constantly excoriated for not having held elections, while the West is just basically indifferent to Kagame's totally implausible wins, and he's even toasted at Davos every year. He stayed home this year. He stayed home this year to invade the Congo, but I'm sure he'll. So democratic forms are not, you know, not always the best thing, at least right now in Africa. Oh,
Okay.
one other thing I might say about that is that to excoriate Eritrea, it's constantly being called the North Korea of Africa, which is of course even worse than the Cuba of Africa. We're all supposed to know that North Korea is horrible.
Thank you. Next is Citizen of the Planet, followed by Janet Coburn.
Yes, my apologies, everyone, for asking a question that's a little off topic, except that Anne writes for Black Agenda Report. As you know, Dan Kovalik, an older white male leftist author, labor expert, and activist, was a guest here back on February 26th. And during the question and comment segment, I referenced a formal online public commentary of mine back then entitled Cancel Culture Critic Critiqued by me, Joseph Anderson of Berkeley, in the Berkeley Daily Planet, which anyone can look up from the title or the relevant search terms, where I was criticizing Kovalik's tirade against so-called cancel culture and so-called identity politics, including even his tirade against the Black Lives Matter movement when he was once in a project-centered online interview by Mickey Huff. So in an email exchange of mine with you, you said you agreed with Kovalik. I don't know whether you agree with Kovalik's opposition to the Black Lives Matter movement. So given that you are a writer for an online publication indeed named Black Agenda Report, which among other things tries to hold white racist public figures accountable, or public figures who make racist comments accountable, even if those public figures are on the left, public accountability that many older straight white males, but not only white males from the 60s generation call cancel culture. I'm wondering how you can write for a publication indeed called Black Agenda Report, which of course would also support the Black Lives Matter movement, and yet you hardly agree with Kovalik about his being anti-so-called cancel culture and anti-so-called identity politics, terms which I pointed out before have no standard definition, as well as Kovalik being anti the Black Lives Matter movement. Thank you.
Well, I I don't know of Dan being anti-Black Lives Matter, and I'm certainly not anti-Black Lives Matter, nor is Black Agenda Report. Black Agenda Report thinks that identity politics have been used to divert attention from class issues. And Norman Finkelstein says the same thing. He wrote a book to this extent, that woke culture, cancel culture, identity politics are used to obscure class issues. As you know, Black Agenda Report is highly critical of what it calls the Black misleadership class, but they're certainly not opposed to Black Lives Matter. And, you know, of course, are in favor of Black liberation everywhere, including Africa.
Okay,
Well,
thank
yeah,
you.
excuse
And the
me.
next one is, let's
Can
move
I
on
just
to the
say
next
one
question.
thing? Can I just say one sentence? And yet they call themselves Black Agenda Report and are concerned with Black liberation. That's certainly an identity. Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Janet Coburn, please.
Thanks, Richard. Hi, Anne. Thank you
Hi.
for your informative presentation. A few things. With the U.S. and other foreign military bases in the Sahel and elsewhere in Africa, can you talk about the state of the anti-colonial national militaries in the Sahel and in other parts of Africa and how they are financed? Can you talk about how anti-colonial movements can force out foreign bases? And also, I think there have been ones that have been forced out. And then finally, could you talk about the religious demographics in different parts of Africa? I'm particularly interested in the Muslim influence.
Could you just stick to one question, please?
Thank you.
Okay, let me go back. The first one was about the militaries. I'm afraid I'm repeating myself a lot here, but let's say I'm going back to emphasize points that I made earlier. The Sahel states expelled French and US military, but they said, go, you're out of here. And, you know, it took a little time, but not a lot of time. Sometimes it took 6 months or so to get them out. And they have formed a unified military force to fight terrorism. How have they funded it? Well, the state funds it. And I said they've gotten some help from Russia, which was their only logical security partner after France out. I don't know, well, aside from Eritrea, I don't know of another national military that I would call anti-colonial. Like I said, Eritrea first, and then the Sahel states are the only ones I know of who've refused to collaborate with AFRICOM, the U.S. Africa Command. And one thing the U.S. Africa Command has done has been to go in and pay soldiers more than they would otherwise make in their home countries to create this loyalty to Africa, particularly in Somalia, where there's been an international African stabilization peacekeeping force for many years. The soldiers from other countries who are there as part of that peacekeeping mission make far more money than they could make at home. In fact, it even in Burundi, it created a middle class that didn't exist before. And so they're invested in the continuation of the conflict. I know I'm not giving you the positive response you're looking for. South Africa already also has an essentially sovereign army. I'm afraid that's about the best I can do there. It's you know, regarding AFRICOM, it's more negative than positive, but the Sahel states and Eritrea are promising in their examples for the rest of Africa. I mean, the Sahel states are really giving hope to the rest of Africa.
Thank you.
The religious
Next one is Raj. please, and followed by Judith Osterman.
Yeah, and thank you very much. I learned
Sure.
a lot from your talk and also last time, so thank you
Mhm.
very much. Yeah, it's very encouraging what you said about the Sahel states, which are together they form about their population is about 75 million. They're about
Mhm.
25 each.
Mhm.
And they have support from Russia to kick out the French colonial control, uh, which they were exercising indirectly through their thing on the currency thing. So that's a very good. Now, my question is, why is this not can't be a possibility in Congo, which has, DR Congo has suffered so much under this is one of the worst things that Belgium did in Africa was in Congo, as I recall. And I saw that literacy rate is pretty high in DR Congo. So there must be what is the potential of them having something more progressive and powerful nationalist movement that can bring the country to something like Sahel, because Sahel was states are, I thought they were quite backward in my own mind, ignorance maybe. So that's my question. Congo, what's the possibility?
Basically, what's the hope? Where's the hope for the
Yeah,
Democratic Republic
yeah,
of the Congo?
yeah.
It's, I gotta say, it's hard to find. I wish it were easier to find, but there are figures like the assassinated singer-rapper that I talked about, who greatly inspired people. He was part of a movement called Lucha, Fight for the Congo. There was a hero in Eastern Congo during the M23. The M23 war going on right now is the second M23 war. There was one from 2011 to 2014, and a military leader emerged, Mamadou Ndala Mustafa, who was beloved by the people of Eastern Congo, and he actually managed to organize and command the military such that they were able to drive Rwanda and Uganda back into Rwanda and Uganda. But there was then a pathetic peace process, so-called peace process, took place in Uganda, which was ridiculous because Uganda was one of the aggressors. But this was arranged. It was paid for by Howard Buffett, Warren Buffett's son, who has huge resource interests in the region. His interest is industrial economy, genetically modified seeds, all kinds of repressive agricultural processes. And he paid for this peace conference. The result was nothing good for the people of the DRC. And shortly after that, Mamadou was assassinated. Mamadou had become too popular. Joseph Kabila was the president then, and people had been marching in the streets in Goma, chanting Kabila no, Mamadou si. So Mamadou had become too powerful and too popular. So, you can hope for grassroots movements that would ultimately reclaim state power, but that hasn't existed since the assassination of Patrice Lumumba in 1961. Congo has been
That was a
ruled by
long time ago. That was a
military.
long time ago. It's 70
Pardon me?
years.
It's
That's
so
a long
rich.
time ago. Yeah.
I mean, the extent of the chaos and the suffering is like proportional to the, I don't know if that's the right word, but it's because of the immense. Everybody wants a piece of Congo. I could also say something about the UNSC. I said the UNSC was passing these resolutions saying that Rwanda should withdraw its troops. And so they keep passing the resolution, and then they keep calling on Rwanda to withdraw as though that's going to be imposing sanctions to stop the weapons flow and weapons flow in and minerals flow out. That means some of the major powers, those with veto power on the UNSC, don't want that to happen. It never comes to the point where those resolutions are put forward and then vetoed, but everybody knows that their interest on the UNSC, they want the system of exploitation to continue, and they would veto any resolution that would be effective.
Thank you.
Okay. I see Gerald there.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but I think,
Richard, you're muted.
yeah.
Okay, why don't we go to Judith Osterman? So go ahead and unmute yourself, Judith.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. All right. So I
Let's
was
please try to
wondering.
keep it short. We're running out of time. Go ahead, please.
All right. I was wondering about Eritrea. What kind of relationship do they have with Yemen? And also, if you can just say, is religion a factor in the Sahel and in Eritrea? Okay, thank you.
With regard to Yemen, Eritrea actually has some disagreements about ownership of islands in the Red Sea in between Yemen and Eritrea. But it certainly doesn't support the bombing of Yemen or the military presence. It doesn't support the war in Gaza. I don't know of it having any kind of like military collaboration with Yemen. And as I said, there's this ongoing disagreement about ownership of these islands in the Red Sea.
Do they take a position on Israel?
Yeah, opposed to the war in Gaza. Unfortunately, Ethiopia has several times abstained on the resolutions in support of Gaza and Palestine at the UN, but Eritrea always votes for Gaza and Palestine. Let's see. You had a question about religion within Eritrea. Religion within Eritrea, the Sahel states.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are they Christian or Muslim?
Well, that's an interesting question with regard to Eritrea, because they have a very peaceful coexistence of Muslim and Christian religions. In fact, when I was there in Asmara, I took a picture of a mosque and a Christian church that were very close to one another in the beautiful city of Asmara. They don't have religious conflict, but there are, some of these quack evangelical preachers who get in there, as they do in other parts of Africa. And Eritrea has expelled some of them, and then the West makes a big deal about it. The Sahel states are predominantly Muslim, I believe, but I'm not an expert in this. As I said, they have jihadi terrorists to struggle with in all three countries. In fact, I think Burkina Faso is struggling to regain about 40% of its territory from jihadi terrorists. I don't know anything else about religion in the Sahel states. I certainly don't hear about religious conflict there.
Okay, next is Steve. If you would unmute yourself and ask your question, and we're going to wrap up. Steve, followed by Gerald.
Very good. Yeah, this has been an excellent program. I participate on a radio program here in Oakland, and I just want to let you know that everything you're talking about, we cover everything.
Mm-hmm.
You're the kind of person we would love to work with more, collaborate more, share information, so our listeners can get the facts right about what's happening in Africa. We're very impressed with what's occurring in the Sahel area. We think it's a great leap forward for Africa. And just thank you for sharing what you shared today, because we can't find it anywhere.
Well, it's all over the web. Like I said, Google Sahel States Alliance, Google the names of the presidents. You'll find all kinds of YouTube channels like Africa is Powerful. I showed a picture from one of the videos of Africa is Powerful where Ibrahim Traore is speaking at the event when they raised the flag of the Alliance of the Sahel States. I mean, you watch a lot of these videos, you will start to feel really heartened, and maybe like you've been watching a Pontecorvo or Costa Gavras film.
Thank you.
And
Next
what's the name of your show?
Slave Revolt Radio.
Oh, okay. And it's on what station?
KEXU. You know what? I will text
you
it
can
to
put
you.
it on the chat. Can you put it on the chat, please, so everybody can see it?
Okay.
Okay. Well, by coincidence, the next questioner is Joel Smith.
Okay. I wanted to ask you, and do you know anything about this recent expulsion from Niger? That three so-called executives, oil executives that were organizing the Niger oil industry, okay? It was three different Chinese companies they were given 48 hours to leave the country. I understand. No, I mean, this is, I understand that the Nigerian people say, look, they were paying themselves 7 times what other people made working for the oil company. Okay. And also, do you know anything about this? That's all. I would like to know, do you know anything about the expulsion of these Chinese executives from Niger? Thank you.
Well, I don't think I know more than you do. I mentioned that earlier, and you may remember more than I do because you say they were oil company execs. I wasn't sure whether they were oil or mining execs, but yeah, they were given 48 hours to leave the country because they were evading taxes, polluting, doing every kind of exploitation that Western corporations have done. So yeah, they were.
But were they linked to the government of China?
Oh, I don't know. I can't answer that question, but it's a good question. There are both, in Africa, there are both Chinese national corporations and private corporations.
They say that they were exercising the right to organize and to utilize what they call resource sovereignty. And I think it makes sense, but I just want to know more about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And the next is Mehmet.
Hi, and thank you very much for a very good presentation and information. I think this subject should come out a lot everywhere, but unfortunately it doesn't. Now, as you mentioned, China being in the continent and Africa now becoming the place, the arena where imperialists also are trying to re-exert themselves, and some of these countries moving French forces out of their country. So it looks like there is a heating up of these contradictions. imperialism doesn't want China to be there, but China is there. And all these independent movements are coming up. Do you see a heated up contradiction or a clashes happening in Africa? Or where is this going to? Are we going to see some wars there? Are we going to see some big major changes? What do you think?
Well, you mean wars between the powers of the developed world in Africa?
Yes, that is possible. We can see imperialism using the countries there to fight the Chinese coming in or other forces coming in. They can have them stick at each other. So because it was a forgotten continent for a long time, but now it has become the new area where people are competing for the resources and everything. So it's bound to become much more heated out there. Well, I'd like to hear what you think about that.
I don't think you're going to see, for instance, Chinese and American or Russian and American or European soldiers clashing with one another on the ground in Africa. Let me see. As I said, China doesn't have a military command. China is trying to win hearts and minds by building infrastructure, not always completely keeping its promises, but that's what it does. And obviously, the plow is more persuasive than the sword, although, as I explained, by paying AFRICOM, by paying soldiers in AFRICOM more than they would make otherwise, they're creating loyalty there. It's the main question about whether or not there'll be a military confrontation between first world powers in Africa. If that is no, these are proxy wars.
Yes, proxy wars mostly, but anything is open now.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure I get it. I've seen like instances in Burundi when Burundi was going up against Western powers, and Burundi had given a contract to mine its nickel, which is the primary resource there, to a Russian firm, which bid a higher price. They offered a higher price and a better deal. At that point, the U.S. and the West deployed the genocide narrative. At the beginning of this, I mentioned the genocide narrative. They started claiming that there was a genocide against the Tutsi, of course, against the Tutsi going on in Burundi, which neighbors Rwanda and has the same ethnic makeup, Hutu and Tutsi. And they tried to get the African Union to intervene. And as ECOWAS refused to intervene in the Sahel states, the African Union refused to intervene in Burundi. They're not having a lot of luck at that. But you're not going to see. Well, you do have proxy wars all over the continent. But let me just leave it there. You're not going to see first world armies going to war on the continent.
Thank you. We're getting close to wrapping up. Our next speaker is Norma, followed by Citizen of the Planet on the second round, and that'll be the last, I think.
It's a probably distant point, but the idea, I just loved it. You know, they kicked out, is it the ambassador from the from South Africa to the US?
Oh yeah.
Who? Do you know?
I'm not really comfortable about that. Of course, I've been following Trump and Musk's
it's just phenomenal. You know, the government cannot stand knowing anything. It crushes it, and it's been crushing here in the United States of us from the cradle. We are diseducated constantly. This is just another one. I mean, the ambassador fellow from South Africa knew too much and is way left and communicates it. Says, you guys are bad guys.
Okay, thank you. The final one is Citizen of the Planet, and please keep your questions short.
Yes.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add, because I wanted to remain under my 2 minutes for my question and comment. that the late founder of Black Agenda Report, Glenn Ford, and I knew each other very well. We often went out for drinks together when he was in the Bay Area. And also in my article, I provide an audio link to the Kabbalic interview by Mickey Huff, and in which you can hear him himself talk about how he's against the Black Lives Matter movement. The ironic thing about such older white male public figures from the 60s, like Dan Kabbalic, always talking about cancel culture, is that they get to be publicly interviewed and published in the left or even in sometimes mainstream liberal venues almost whenever they want. And like Mickey Huff, they even have their own radio shows. So Mickey and I have been friends for a long time, and I still respect his work with Project Censored. But in my article, which I referenced, Cancel Culture Critique, Mickey Huff accused me of trying to cancel him. And he's a full professor, I don't know if he's still head of Project Censored, but he's got all these credentials, which to me showed that even though I'm friends with Mickey Huff and he's had my back before, so I'm going to be polite with him, but which shows that what these older white leftist males from the 60s can include in cancel culture is just any criticism of them on any matter at all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think that's the end of the question and answer. I want to again thank Ann Garrison for participating this morning, this afternoon, and this evening on Sunday morning Marxist Forum. And I want to invite everybody to come back next week when we'll have Seth Morrison from the Jewish Voice for Peace talking about the weaponization of anti-Semitism. Thank you all for coming today, and we'll stop the recording now.
Thanks for
Thank
inviting
you
me.
all.
Thank you.
Institute for the Critical Study of Society at the Nebo Proctor Marxist Library receives no corporate funding, nor do we have any paid staff. We rely on the support of working class folks that share our commitment to the socialist legacy of Karl Marx. We continue to need funds to meet necessary expenses, since we can no longer pass the hat at our in-person forums. Please send contributions to our treasurer, either online via PayPal or by check. The PayPal ID is ICSS Sunday, SUNDAY, @yahoo.com, and the name is Richard Fallenbaum. And checks may be made out to Richard Fallenbaum and sent to him at 1225 Nielsen Street, Berkeley, California, 94706. Fallenbaum is spelled Fallenbaum. To donate directly to the Marxist Library, send a check to the Nebo Proctor Marxist Library at 6501 Telegraph Avenue, Oakland, California, 94609, or directly or donate online at www.paypal.me/npml. For information, write to npml at marxistlibr.org, and the website is marxistlibr.org.